So I don't know about you guys, but I am very concerned with Black Myth Wukong. I'm trying to make sure this doesn't come out. Okay. So I don't know about you guys, but with the recent reviews of Black Myth Wukong, I am both concerned and a bit confused because when the game was first announced, however many years ago, I remember my two friends having a discussion about it, and they were both very excited, very intrigued, and I was on the side very skeptical because I felt what we saw was too good to be true. And the same thing happened with No Man's Sky. They were very excited, they were discussing it at length, and I was on the sidelines very skeptical of No Man's Sky, and I felt what they were showing and telling us was complete bullshit. And what did you know? When it released, it was complete bullshit. And after update after update after update, years later, No Man's Sky is in a much better state currently. But Black Myth Wukong is doing something similar, not so much with No Man's Sky, but more so with Cyberpunk 2077. Now, the reviews that are out now are only the PC version of the game. And from what I understand, there is still the embargo that is preventing the reviewers from showing anything beyond Chapter 2 of the game. Now, why is this an issue? Well, when Cyberpunk was sending out the review copies and they were allowing the reviewers to post their thoughts on that game, they only allowed those reviewers to show gameplay that was provided by CD Projekt Red, and they weren't allowed to show their own gameplay of their experiences, which had a lot of bugs and glitches and crashes, etc. So with Black Myth Wukong, it's something similar in the sense that reviewers cannot show anything beyond Chapter 2, and at least from IGN's perspective, any major issues that they had with the game all seem to be happening after Chapter 2. Some of these issues that I've heard about is the audio being completely gone for a portion of the game, as well as the subtitles. The subtitles would disappear with the audio, so you cannot hear what's going on in the cutscene. You can't read what's going on in the cutscene because it's all gone. There's also been reports that the game will completely change the language from English to Chinese out of nowhere, which is an issue for people who play in America who are using the English voice and subtitles to play. Considering it is a game from a Chinese developer, it makes sense that they would obviously have the Chinese voice option, and maybe why the bug is in place to switch it to the Chinese language as opposed to another language. But there's other issues besides that with audio only. There's other issues besides audio, such as the character falling through the levels and, I guess causing your death, or having to get the game will crash after like a certain section, or after a boss fight, the game will crash and you have to respawn at your last save point, which was before the boss fight. So if it was a challenging boss fight and the game crashed, guess what? You got to do it again. And this is also in tie to PC ports, because the reviews are only the PC version of the game. They have not allowed the PS5 version of the game to be reviewed by the reviewers. And if you are not aware, lately a lot of PC ports have been horrible. It's more common with games that are releasing on PC after they released on console, more specifically with the PlayStation games, the PS5 exclusive games, or PlayStation Studio games. When they release on PC, they have a lot of bugs and issues and really, really horrible ports that are, prepared. But there's other PC games that also have a really bad PC port as well, not just the Sony exclusives. Star Wars Jedi Survivor is another example of a game that had a horrible PC port. Just to name a couple of them, not to go down a whole list. But what I'm basically getting at is, if these bugs are happening on the PC version of the game, is it going to be the same for console, or is it just the PC version that is affected? And the reason why this is concerning is because, again, it's just like Cyberpunk. They were not allowing the reviewers to show their own gameplay, or in this case, anything beyond Chapter 2. And if that's the embargo, if that's what they're banning reviewers from doing right now, that tells me there's something concerning about the game that needs to be addressed before release, or day one release, whatever, day one patch release. So, number one, is the game horrible on PS5 or as buggy on PS5 as it is on PC? Number two, the PC port cannot run at 60 frames per second, which tells me it's probably locked at 30, or it dips below 60. If that's the case, is it going to run at 30 on PS5, or can it run on 60 frames on PS5? Can it go beyond that for the supported TV and monitors to 120 frames per second, especially with someone like me who now has a Sony InZone M9 gaming monitor that can run 120 frames per second on PS5 and 140, I believe, on PC? You're not going to get those numbers with this game, most likely, especially if the PC port already can't do 60. And then as for PC gamers, I'm not a PC gamer. I have no real knowledge or experience with PC at all. But the numbers that they were saying that you would need to run this game on PC, to me, it seems overly pricey. It seems like the requirements for the PC port is so high and bizarre that it makes me wonder why even bother upgrading a PC you have to match the specs just for one game that is not even running properly right now. If you're a PC gamer and the specs required for Black Myth Wukong are not as far out or advanced as I think it is, let me know in the comments and educate me, because from looking on the outside, it seems like the PC port has a heavy system requirement when compared to PlayStation. You just got to have the console and it could play. Going on from that, the game, of course, is not releasing on Xbox at this time. I don't know if it's planned to release on Xbox later on or if it's not going to be on Xbox at all. And the reasoning that was given was the developers did not want to put in the work to port it onto Xbox. Now, that comes down to, I feel, two primary points. Number one, it is a small developing team, smaller than Stellar Blade, which was also a smaller team releasing a major game that had roughly 300 people or so on staff, whereas Black Myth has a third of the size, only about 100 people on staff making the game, which is incredible to see how the game looks visually, that 100 people on staff made this type of game visually, but could also explain why the game has some issues running the game performance-wise, because it's a smaller team. But with the idea of not wanting to port the game over to Xbox as a smaller team, it makes sense and it doesn't make sense, because if you don't know, games cannot release on the Xbox unless it is able to run on both the Series X and the S at the same exact time. If you cannot make the game run on both of them at the same time, you can't release the game on the Series X first and then later on release it on Series S after the fact. This was the reason why Baldur's Gate 3 did not release on Xbox right away. They had to put the work in so it can run on the Series X and the Series S, which also caused the game to cut some features for the weaker Series S model. And I still think the Xbox Series S is a really great console for someone who wants a budget gaming option. They want something that is going to play these games just at a slightly lower performance and quality, something that has a smaller footprint, doesn't take up too much space on your setup. It's not overly heavy, so you can take it with you in a book bag and bring it to a friend's house or something. But it's the development restrictions of the Series S that I think is also hurting gaming, the current gen gaming, because developers cannot release the game to the maximum, specs and performance that they want to put the work in, because they have to, for lack of a better term, dumb it down, quote unquote, for the Series S to run it. So the point being that Black Myth would have to be developed for Series S and X to release at the same time on Xbox. And that will also include the possibility of doing, cloud streaming, which cloud streaming I still think sucks. But along with that, the PC port can't run 60 frames, so the PC port is already weaker, in my opinion, and therefore, how will it run on PS5? Now, the other concerning or rather confusing thing about this game is the reviewers that have the review copy sending out the reviews today, which is August 16th. They're giving it 8 out of 10, saying the game is great. The game has some good combat. Yeah, it's a learning curve with the combat, but really great combat, similar to God of War or Bayonetta style, not so much Souls-like, which thank God, because I'm not a Souls-like player. I hate the get good mindset. I think it's very uninviting for people who want to try a Souls game. So thankfully, it is more closer to something like God of War, which I'm a fan of, and I played God of War since the beginning, so I actually like that aspect. And I also am very intrigued and interested in the different transformations that you can do, whether it's combat or exploration. But why is this game getting 8 out of 10s for the reviews when the complaints are audio issues, buggy gameplay, different glitches, character falling through the map? There's also, from what I heard, a concern where a majority of the game is more so a boss rush type of game, and Anything that's in between those modes with your, slight exploration and some other types of combat with other enemies that are not bosses, they say that those sections outside of boss fights are not as developed or not as fun or as engaging or as interesting. So how massive of a portion of the game is the exploration? And if it's a large part of the game, that means a large part of this game is not fun or developed well or exciting or engaging. And therefore, the only part of the game that's really worth spending the money on is the boss fights. Now, I'm not a boss rush kind of guy. I don't really care about that kind of game mode. I love when games put them, or developers put them in the game so that people who want to play it and challenge themselves, they can have that option. If I decide to do it myself, I have that option. But I'm not saying the boss rush type of game is going to put me away from buying this game. It's more so anything in between that may not be as exciting or engaging, maybe bland, is a problem because it's kind of like dragging your feet to the next exciting boss fight. And I don't want to feel like I'm dragging my feet out of boredom. I don't want to feel like I'm forcing myself to play when I'm overly bored until I get to the next boss fight. There is also a concern that the game has no map at all. And so when you have some of these larger environments, because remember, it's not an open world game, it is a very linear game with various sections that will be much more open. Without an actual map, the complaint has been it's hard to tell where you're supposed to go, what route you're supposed to follow, what objects and environments you're allowed to travel to and not travel to. Is there an invisible wall? Can you go through this obstacle or not? That's a big issue by not having a map in the game. Maybe that would have been led to one person they could have hired to do the map, or maybe they felt it would be more immersive without a map for whatever reason. I sometimes play certain games like Grand Theft Auto or Spider-Man without the radar available to me just to add a bit more immersion, but it shouldn't be something missing from the game entirely. This isn't Battlefield 2042 missing the scoreboard, just a little side joke for you there, but I think a lack of a map is a big problem for a lot of gamers, and it's just bizarre that they couldn't include that in the game, where they chose not to include it. I don't know what the story is. Maybe they are working on one. Maybe they couldn't do it in time. Whatever the case is, that's a concern. So there's a lot of things in this game that, from the reviews that are out now, which the game is like 4 days away from releasing, from the reviews that we got, there's enough concerns to justify getting a lower score than an 8 out of 10, maybe like a 7 type of thing. That's not so much a 6 or a 5. That's why when I do my game reviews, I don't do a score out of 10. I do a score on you should buy it full price, you should wait for a sale, or you should not buy this game at all. And with this game also not having a physical release at this time, I don't know how I feel, because I am a physical game collector. I'm from the 90s, so I love physical media, but I have gotten a bit more into the digital market because of my PlayStation Portal. I can then play my games digitally on the Portal if I'm out somewhere and using my hotspot or someone else's Wi-Fi, which I have tested the hotspot on the Portal. It ran okay, but point being, if I want to change my game, I have to actually change the disc for my physical collection, whereas digital, I don't really have to change the disc or anything. I don't have to get up and do it because, I'm lazy now. But I am okay with a digital purchase if the game is great. Like Alan Wake 2 was digital only at the time I bought it on my Xbox. Do not regret that purchase at all. So if Black Myth is going to be digital only and you can buy a case from the stores and have a code inside the case, no disc, but digital only, I would purchase the game and justify the purchase if the game is great, runs well, it's very exciting, very engaging. But also if PlayStation has a pretty good refund policy, which I don't think they do. I know Xbox has a great refund policy, which doesn't apply here because the game is not coming to Xbox. I know Steam has a great refund policy, so those on Steam who regret their purchase can get their money back. I think PlayStation is a bit of a workaround because I've done it before. You kind of have to go to their support online, chat with an agent, express the issue, and let them try to get you a refund. So $60 is still a hefty price, even back on the PS4 and Xbox One era. $60 price tag was ridiculous. 70 is even more so ridiculous. So thankfully, Black Myth is in the 60 price range. But again, I cannot be certain if my purchase would be great if the game doesn't have any reviews for PS5, or if the PS5 version runs even worse than PC. I heard mixed responses on if the game is going to be more like 15 to 20 hours or if it's going to be more like 40 plus hours. I've heard both numbers. No idea what the case is there. I prefer something less than 40, in my opinion. I don't want to put too much time into a game that I don't really have the time to put in because of everything else I have to work on. But let me know in the comments if you're concerned as well, especially given the reviews that came out and my thoughts from the reviews that I've read and heard and all that stuff. So let me know in the comments what you think. Am I just crazy and I should just get the game when it comes out? Is the game going to be amazing? Is it going to suck? What do you think? Just let me know in the comments down below. We'll have a conversation. And hey, while you're there, might as well subscribe to the channel. It's free. It's not going to cost you anything. It'll help me make more content for you guys because I really want to do this more and more. So just subscribe. Why not? So I'm Anthony Alon. Thank you for watching this video. Catch you guys on the next one. Peace out.